As has become the custom on downloadable content, I like to do a few recordings each year in which I open the floor to the panel, with no set topic or no set idea, just an open discussion where everyone can talk about anything they want related to video games. It could be a game that they're playing, it could be a news item, it could be a rant, a gripe, anything they want. This is the first of the free play episodes for Season 7, so listen in, because not even I know where we'll go. Next on downloadable content. Hello everyone, welcome to Downloadable Content. I am Brian, and with me we have Wyatt.
Hello.
And we have Reid. Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, first appearance since the Season 7 opener, way the hell back in January.
Oh, has it been that long already?
Yes, it has. But that's alright. It wasn't like the last episode where Ben was making his first appearance for the first time in 2 years. So...
Yeesh.
So there we are. So, yes, before we dive into this first free play episode of Season 7, just want to remind the wide world of the internet that every single episode can be found on our website, dlcpodcast.com. Every episode is also found on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, and now Google Play Music. Be sure to also check out our website for upcoming episodes, give us feedback. You can even give us ideas for future episodes, or even stuff that you want us to talk about on a future free play episode. So, it's all there, www.dlcpodcast.com, and I'll give Wyatt some time to plug Sprites and Dice toward the end, so.
Fine, make me wait.
Patience, Augustus. You're on my show now. So, gentlemen, here we are. We've had the Switch as the big thing 2 months ago now. We have E3 coming up in mid-June, and we have some definite things to talk about between now and then. So, Wyatt, since you are not typically on these things very often, I will let you go first, since I'm usually the one that opens up a free play episode. So,
oh man,
I'll give you the floor first, put you on the spot.
It's tough. I mean, as you know, with my podcast, we just hit episode 10 and we're trying to figure out our format, and we try to be a little bit more measured and controlled. So free plays opening up a whole can of worms. The thing that I jumped to first in my head, because again, it's just jumping on without any previous notice, so this should be interesting. There's been a lot of really, really good games that have come out in the last 2 months. I mean, good stuff that I've been waiting on for quite some time. We had PAX 2 months ago. That's also when the Switch came out. So a whole bunch of games like Breath of the Wild, Mass Effect Andromeda. I know a small one that me and Reid like that we've been kind of waiting to be out in full for a while is Orcs Must Die Unchained, and I've been playing that, and that's been a blast. But the one I really want to talk about, because I'm pretty sure I could write half of a novel, or at least a dissertation, on Horizon Zero Dawn, because it is the AAA game that I have had the most fun playing in years.
It is one of those games that I've seen it, I've seen trailers, I've seen a bit of gameplay. This is one of those games that make me go, I kind of actually want a PS4, because as far as I know, it's an exclusive to PS4 at this point.
And to be fair, that is probably one of its only detractors. It is a new IP, a new intellectual property that we kind of got a hint of at game shows years ago. And there was this trailer of a woman taking on metallic dinosaurs in really interesting new ways. And everyone went, what the heck is this? And when I actually got this game, I got it from GameStop as a used because I wasn't sure if it was going to be good or not. And I had Antonella over, and I wanted to try out games with her because, right, that's something I've been doing with her since high school. Is we try out a game, we kind of couch play together, where she tells me what to do and I'm the goer to do it. And I got so sucked in, I kept the game and I beat it with like 92% completion by the end of it because it is so good. It is not just a gimmick of a woman fighting robot dinosaurs. They put in hours and hours of dialogue and text, and there's actually subtext as to why things are happening the way they are, and there's commentary about, you know, humanity and futurism society and, you know, ways people approach, you know, the end of the world or approach bad news and good news. And it's amazing. It's an open world game that manages to work in a lot of tutorials and a lot of the kind of game mechanics into the game, so it's very fluid and flawless. Then when I, you know, finished playing that game, I tried to jump on Mass Effect Andromeda, which is a great game, but in comparison, it feels like a video game, right? Instead of what Horizon Zero Dawn does, which is it draws you in so completely that as you're learning how to play the game and as it's kind of revealing the world to you, it doesn't feel like you're playing a video game. It feels like you're just hearing a story and you're learning through it. It's a very great immersive experience, and I recommend it for everyone. I know I've been selling it pretty hard. I think I just sold it to Reid pretty hard too.
You did, actually. Yeah, it was one of those games that was sort of on the radar. I had heard of it. And initially, it didn't seem too exciting for me, I have to admit. Like the premise and like most of the scenes I had seen of it, of like cave woman fighting giant robot dinosaurs, was like, all right, visually it looks cool, but I feel like we've done enough games of, you know, primitive nature people versus robo animal or robot something or another. It just was like, all right, it doesn't look all that great. Then reviews started coming in, and you've talked up a lot about Wyatt. And not just the you know, gameplay aspects, but how polished it is in so many elements, that I finally decided it's like, all right, I'm going to download it, get it installed on the PS4, make some room on my sad amount of storage space on that unit, and play it. And I've absolutely loved the game, like every moment of it so far. It's just, it really came as a surprise. It seemed like such a generic kind of concept, like something from a 90s Saturday morning cartoon or something. Instead of Cadillacs and dinosaurs, it's, you know, cave people dinosaurs and robo dinosaurs. But yeah, it's been a fantastic game.
So, right, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about it because, I mean, the one reason why I don't want to really talk about it too much is that it's such a great game that, because of the way the story reveals itself, is kind of what makes it so good. The way that I knew that it was going to be a game that was more than just a gimmick is kind of when you saw the game in trailers, they were selling you on this fact that it was a beautiful world, that it was an open world, and that you were going to be fighting monsters in a way that you weren't doing it before. So one of the trailers was obviously giant robot dinosaur, and you are, you know, a woman fighting it. But the way you fought it was that you had a weapon that let you tie ropes to the dinosaur to tug it down to the ground, and you had to break off components from it and then harvest it and kind of break it down piece by piece. So that looked interesting in terms of combat. But what they didn't really tell you was the story. This is not a game like Fallout. So Fallout is great because of the theme, right? It's sort of, okay, 1960s, let's put the apocalypse in that sort of time period, or the way that's how people react to it. And then you kind of go from there. In this game, it's all about how the world ended before you, and you're kind of trying to figure that out as someone who's in the future looking back at our time period.
That sounds like that sounds a little bit like sort of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, sort of.
Right, but instead of you being the time traveler, you're one of the people in the future going, what the heck happened? We know something's wrong. We know something doesn't add up with the way the world is, but we can't figure it out. Is that a fair assessment, Reid?
Yeah, no, I think I'd agree with that. It doesn't automatically just hand you this, you know, the basic plot and here's what's going on. Go and kill X number of robot rats or whatever. It's very much more. There's a story, but it's waiting for you to like explore and kind of discover and find out bits and pieces of it. And I do have to agree with Brian. Like it feels in some ways like the Time Machine, simply because you're seeing the remains of humanity, but not in that Fallout. These are freshly burned, more in the same way that we look at the pyramids and things as these ancient ruins. So it's a really interesting setup they have, the whole way the world is delivered to you.
Right. And again, I don't want to give away the plot, because part of the joy of this game is how they reveal information, because they do a very good job of kind of piecing it out to you little by little. But Kotaku ran this article about how the group behind this game was the same group behind Fallout New Vegas, and how they had to spend hundreds of hours, on how they were going to do the backstory. They did hundreds of hours on how they were going to do the backstory. And that was because instead of Fallout, where it says, okay, the bomb was dropped, we're in the ruins, here we go. This one, wait a second, how do we tie in where we are to where we were? How do we make people care about it? And you can really see the polish during the tutorial section, where you're playing as the main character, Aloy, when she's a 6-year-old, then 9-year-old, and 12-year-old girl. And you actually play through some of the areas as you're being taught how to survive in the wilds. And there's an area where you are dropped into the ruins of the world past, and you find out that, for where she was raised, no one goes into these ruins. They're forbidden, they're evil, they're wrong, you're not supposed to be there. Because that's, the machine spirits and the metal devil and all these sort of ideas as to why this stuff has stayed buried. And you start revealing stuff because you have access to information that other people do not. And you get a few hints that don't give away anything, except for the fact that the people that were in this ruin were scared out of their minds and were ready to almost pass on their own. But they don't give you any excuse or any way how it happened. So it could have been a nuke. It could have been a disease. You don't know at the start of the game.
It could have been the Trump administration.
And we're now topical.
God,
it was going to happen.
God,
it was going to happen.
You set it up for that. I'm sorry.
Now you're talking about this game, and I'm thinking of taking down these giant robots. I'm thinking is this part Shadow of the Colossus? It
does have that feeling sometimes. I mean, Reid, if you don't mind me asking, how far are in you, and what's the biggest thing you've taken down?
Biggest thing I've taken down. I just got through the first cauldron.
Ooh.
So, no, I haven't taken down any giant relatively big fire spewing robot. I don't know, looked like a giant robot flea to me, but so I haven't taken down a lot, but I do have to say the concept is kind of the same for Shadow Colossus, in that you can't just run up to these things and mash this one button to do a ton of damage to whatever part of the body it is. There is that element of strategy where you have to pick sections of the thing you're trying to fight and get up basically a battle plan before you go running in, because there have been plenty of times I've gotten my ass kicked by running in okay, there's only X number of these things. I got a spear, I'll just shoot them a few times from distance, finish them out. Nope.
No.
I know there's friends or so. So there's a lot of scouting the area. There's a lot of possibly laying down some traps and things. It's each fight is requires a little level of strategy, so it's even more strategic, I guess, than Shadow of Colossus, because in that game you would need to find the weak points. This one, it's not just okay, there's the weak point. It's how am I gonna hit that?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that, and because you have crafting, you're crafting your own ammunition, and you have weapons that let you put down traps that let you kind of lay out the area to your advantage. There's a stealth component, and what's great about the game is that it's great on all the different levels. So it's great as an open world game because of the amount of foraging and crafting you have to do in order to succeed at the combat. The combat's great because there are some areas where you kind of go in with your weapon and you're just going to try to take out a whole bunch of bad guys. But then whenever you're fighting more than one robot at a time, even if they're small ones, whenever they finally get to you and you can hear their sound effects when they're going to charge you, you have a moment of, oh crap. Like I got to the end of the game, and even when I was fighting like almost the smallest enemies, I still had this moment of, okay, if they hit me, that's still going to be a major chunk of my health going away, or it's going to knock me out of my ability to aim. So everything always feels very important. Everything that you're doing, which is great.
You know, if there are more PS4 games that are out that I want to play, then I will plunk down the money and actually get it. Because I also want to play this game as well. And at this point, I'm just going to await for the inevitable PC release whenever that happens.
So here's what I'm going to say to you right now. I don't want to overtalk it because, again, we can't talk details unless we want to like start doing spoilers. But one of the reasons why this game is so good, again, the combat is great, the crafting is great, the fact that you can explore. They do collectibles well, where Reid, I don't know if you've started doing like the collectibles, but the collectibles tie into the story, where if you look at them in the inventory, they give you small hints about how the world happened previously, what happened in the world before, but never gives away too much at once. There's always luring you more in. And the story is great for the main plot, but also because a large element of the game is how different tribes or clans in this recreated world or Earth after the apocalypse has decided to deal with the apocalypse. So there's some groups that are now like, oh, we're going to hunt the machines, we're going to scrap them, but we're not going to go back into the metal ruins. They were bad. They killed off the ancient ones. And there's other ones that are trying to learn how to build and learn how to create. And there's other ones that are all about trying to build a society and actually build large buildings as if they were the old ones. And it's really interesting for me as someone who likes to write story and someone who loves story. Each tribe has a different way that they've kind of talked about the apocalypse, and sort of like the cultural conflicts that you find in the game that aren't always about combat, right? It's not just, oh, here's this other tribe, let's go murder them. It's more different philosophical ideas of what to do next in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually kind of reminds me in some ways of the post-apocalyptic movies of the 90s, as crappy as they were. Like, actually kind of in a way Waterworld and The Postman, where it was less people trying to deal with how we're going to survive the apocalypse to, okay, apocalypse happened. This is the world after the fact, and this is just a day in the life of how it's shaped. I mean,
but what do we do?
Well, yeah, there's a little bit of the what we do, but only by like a few curious individuals. A lot of everybody else seems to have kind of made peace in a way with that the world ended, and are, when you look into the tribes, they have their own way of handling it, but really they're kind of just doing their own thing for the most part. It's not quite the same as like the Fallout games or Wastelands, such like that, where it's like, how are we going to live after this, or where can hope be from here? It's who knows how long after the world has come to an end. Nature has reclaimed a lot of the ruins you see, so it must be some amount of time. So for the most part, the civilization as it stands is rebuilt itself to sort of a status quo.
Right.
And interesting to note, as I'm looking at this, that the developer for this game was Guerrilla Games, which I believe is responsible for Killzone.
You're right. They've actually worked on a lot of really interesting games, and if you look at their previous games, even though a lot of them have kind of gone under the radar, they've always had some really interesting subplots or some interesting dialogue that fill out the world, and they took that and use that in this game in a brand new setting, which is really, really, really good. Just because the game is considered to be one of the prettiest games out there right now. Again, they hit the combat, they've hit the open world feeling, although it feels different than Skyrim or Breath of the Wild. It feels like its own beast. It's not, hey, we're an open world game. It has its own connotation, and it still guides you along where it feels like there's a reason for what you're doing. Is what you're doing, right? So like Final Fantasy 15, I have a problem with, because the open world section is in such a weird dissonance with what the actual plot of the game is. Like, oh, here, we're four guys in a car, and we're going to go around, and we're going to hunt badgers and bandits, and we're going to do our own thing. And, oh, by the way, yes, the end of the world is happening, and my country was taken over by an evil empire, but we're going to ignore that and go hunt rabbits. Like, this game, all the side quests make sense. So it adds to the game rather than detracts.
Hey, don't be dissing Bro Trip Simulator 2016 there.
And if you want more on Boy Band Simulator 2017, you can listen to the Final Fantasy 15 episode that we just did.
And we just did a Final Fantasy episode ourselves as well. Yeah. And again, Final Fantasy 15 was not a bad game, but each of the individual parts don't quite add up to a whole. And that's one of the major differences between that and this glorious gem that we have now from Horizon Zero Dawn, where all the individual pieces do stack up into a whole that makes sense, it's cohesive, and it feels just really solid when you play it.
Cool. I really hope it comes out for PC. I mean, if not, then, I eventually, hopefully more games will come out for the PS4 that I actually want to play. So here's hoping, because it looks really, really cool and really interesting, and the fact that you got April looking at this game is an accomplishment in itself. So
my wife was waiting for me to play the game every night. Like, we'd get home from work, she's like, "Hey, want to order wings and pizza, and you'll just cuddle in bed and play the game?" And I was like, "Well, I guess we're going to be playing Horizon Zero Dawn for 4 hours." I wasn't complaining, so it turned into a great game. She loved the story that much. And she even found the combat exciting, because it wasn't just a straight, like Reid said, oh, I'm going to go in headshot, because you have a bow and arrow, because you're fighting things that are much larger than you. You can't just do that. You can't just be like, well, I'm king of the mountain. You have to really plan it out.
Good. Excellent. I'm hopefully we'll get to play that, but so far it's looking pretty good. So, Reid, do you have anything, or do you want me to go?
Actually, I kind of do, and I think it's a bit of a good segue.
Go ahead.
Oh dear, run.
Yeah, anytime I say there's going to be a good segue, just be afraid. Just fear. No, it's I was actually going to kind of talk about the state of console wars and ports of games to PC. I've noticed lately that a lot of your AAA games, your high-tier games, things like that, have been showing up in Steam or Origin, or take your Steam wannabe of choice, depending on the developer and everything. And Horizon is with a few exceptions. Obviously, Mario and Zelda are Nintendo. Nintendo is its own sort of
beast.
Yeah, when it comes to game ports and anything of that nature. But from companies that don't own the hardware of the console, the first real exclusive onto a system that I can think of that had any interest was the Horizon Zero Dawn. I mean, prior to that, most games that I've had any interest in over the last several years have been available, if not on launch day, then within a month or two after it launches on Xbone or the PS4, it's suddenly available on the PC. So I was interested to see if you guys had noticed the same sort of aspect. Are we potentially moving away, especially now that we're getting into VR headsets and VR ready machines, the Oculus, things like that? Are we going to start seeing less of the console exclusive game and just sort of have a game that's going to be available on multiple formats, or think that we'll eventually go back to that route again?
It's actually funny that you bring that up, because one of the, again, as a segue, people have said that one of the only detractors from Horizon Zero Dawn is that it is a console exclusive. At the same time, it's funny that you would say that, because after I finish playing through a game, sometimes I like to go through the comments and the reviews because I'm a masochist like that, which is I want to see what other people think and compare. And again, some of the complaints were, the one reason why I'm not going to get the game is it's a console exclusive, or I'm annoyed by it. I don't know why it has to be. But I saw a lot of comments about, hey, maybe it's time for me to get a PS4. I heard the PlayStation 4 Pro is really good, and there's some bundles out right now. Maybe I'll get it. So it obviously still works as an idea if you do it sparingly enough, but a lot of people were getting really negative press for a while for trying to do exclusive console games, and they have kind of faded as a tactic, but they still exist very occasionally.
Yeah, and there was actually a recent opinion article I read to that effect, which was arguing that, okay, guys, the console wars are over, give it up. And there is some truth to that, because, let's just use the three of us as a relative sample. All three of us are in our 30s, so we have been through the
console wars.
The console wars. We have been through Nintendo and Sega, and the very clear dividing line between. I
feel like that needs to be a shirt someplace. I survived the console wars.
Yeah, there might be. There might be. But you were either firmly entrenched on the Nintendo side, or you were firmly entrenched on the Sega side, and you could not play the fiddle. You could not straddle the fence at all. I did, but that's a completely different story.
Right.
But I did not own a Sega console until high school. So I was Nintendo for all of my life. So now with PC really, really catching on, now I do most of my gaming exclusively on the PC. Ever since somebody said, hey, you can plug in an Xbox 360 controller to your PC and play video games, I was like, what? Because
I think that might actually be a huge part of it, Brian, is the dominance of Steam.
And yes, for me, the biggest hang-up for playing games on PC was I don't want to use keyboard and mouse. I don't want to learn how to walk again. So, I've been using a controller for almost 30 years. I'm not gonna play a PC game and be like, where is this button? While I'm dying in all sorts of ways on screen. So I think a lot more developers have become cognizant of that, and as a result, also to try to maximize their sales, they want to try to cast a wide net as possible. Because you guys know that during the recent economic recession, a lot of major AAA developers stopped taking risk. So we kept getting shovel after shovelful of sequel after sequel after sequel after reboot. I compare Resident Evil 4, which is one of the frickin' poster children for this. It's now been released for the 8th time.
Right.
AAA developers do this, and I do not mind the fact that we are seeing fewer and fewer exclusive titles, because that means that games that I would like to play are becoming more accessible to me. And, I do not have as much disposable income. So my buying I've become much more selective in what video games I buy, especially AAA games, because if I'm going to plunk down $60 for a game, it better be available.
I think this goes back to Steam and the dominance of a digital library, because that's something that's changed. Is not DLC, but the idea that you can have a digital library that you keep with you eternally. So Certainly. I've had to switch 3 computers since gaining Steam. And, I got my new computer and I scroll through my library and I've got over 100 games uninstalled because it was just games that I was able to pick up on Steam sales for literally $2, $3, $4. I'd be able to grab an indie game that looks interesting and I can just drop $5 or $6 on it to give it a shot. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it does. But I always have that, and if I ever want to, I can just go, let me go play that again. Brian, when you were over this last weekend, I was able to play Towerfall Ascension with you. I haven't played that in a year, but I was able to go, oh, okay, let me just reinstall it in 5 minutes and play. Consoles in some ways, at least the way that I've seen them played, are there for that big blockbuster feeling. They're there for you to go, all right, I want to play Final Fantasy 15. I want to play Horizon Zero Dawn.
Or I want to play Destiny or something like that.
I want to play Destiny, right. So that's something that I curl up in bed with a console, and I use my consoles for Netflix, and I use it for these large blockbuster games, usually with my wife wanting to watch for the story or to see what's up with a game. And that's our kind of modus operandi. But then when I want time to just hang out alone or play online with friends, like Heroes of the Storm with Blizzard or with these indie games, I'm able to go onto Steam. Consoles are trying to find a way to compete with that, and the console wars were not a way for them to compete.
No, and
people like a console or they like a company, and not much is going to sway that.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think we've basically just seen like a tug war over the last several years. I mean, in the beginning there was the PC and the PC game, and it was good. Then we got then we got the NES and the Sega and such, and we went from basically having these point-and-click adventures or something that required a mouse to here's a dedicated controller. And I think the controller helped shape a lot of things, and that's in part what, similar to what you were saying about the excitement of being able, get a controller connected through Steam or whatever and play with those type of controls rather than WASD on a keyboard. I think that helped grow the idea with consoles, and it went from the home PC being this thing of it's the tool your dad uses to do taxes on to it's what little Jimmy's going to play Monkey Island when he gets a chance. Here was something dedicated that if you're going to play a game, you didn't have to be afraid of somebody else utilizing it. Over the last couple years, and even it's kind of funny because the last couple years, they've been a lot of different outlets have been trying to say that PC sales are down. We're now moving to tablets and smartphones. But I think with things like Steam and the Steam library, which the price of PC is starting to drop, and the fact that they can do a lot more as well. You have browser-based games, you have your indie games, you have massive multiplayer games, things like that. Some of these aspects kind of started bringing people back towards PC gaming away from the consoles being the high king. And that's helped promote some of that, the lack of specifically console exclusive. It's no longer like, oh man, I need to get me an Xbox so I can play, the latest Halo Wars Adventure Island. But
Halo Wars Adventure Island.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I haven't followed Halo in several years, but now we're kind of in that place where, aside from some companies, like obviously Nintendo is going to be the king of the exclusive for forever, whether it's their console or their handheld, which is starting to get confusing, keep track of what's what, but. Most in terms of Microsoft and Sony, you're going to see more games having that aspect of being able to be on PC because they don't have, Microsoft doesn't have specifically Microsoft that makes Microsoft games, and Sony doesn't have Sony that specifically makes PlayStation games. You have such a menagerie of developers, and the PC has become, especially through avenues like Steam's, things like that, it's become such this great way of getting things out there of, hey, here's this awesome game. It's kind of indie. We're not a huge company, but try it. We're going to have a giveaway or a demo, or it's going to be on Steam for cheap because our second one's coming out to get enough interest. So you're really seeing that, I think there's still a bit of a tug of war in terms of consoles and PCs. The master race is still trying to push down the console peasants, but I really think we're going to see less exclusives. And I think Brian's right, even though right now Horizon is, because that's the first one that really that's the only one that I can think of that's a console exclusive. Mm-hmm. I think we will eventually see a port of that to the PC. Now, if it's a good port or not, who's to say? That'll be interesting to see if it's done well or not. But
yeah, that's a whole different question. But yeah, I mean, Nintendo is only just now taking its first tentative baby steps with that thing called the internet, and so and yes, we all know that Nintendo has a giant repository of its own IPs. As long as Shigeru Miyamoto stays alive, then they'll probably put him in a cryogenic freezer. It's like, no, you can't die. You just have to.
We need you for reasons.
We do, for science. But even then, I mean, we now on the iOS store, you have Super Mario Run, which is a Mario game that is not on a Nintendo console.
Which is brand new, and that's mind-boggling in some ways.
I'm like, oh my god, Mario on an Apple product? Call Scotland Yard.
Well, I think part of that, though, was not just Nintendo learning that there's something called an internet and these other things than what they make, but is also the aspect that handhelds are everywhere. And I don't mean Game Boy or DS. I mean Android or iPhone-based phones, tablets, pads, whatever you call it. It's out there. Yeah. And even at PAX this last year, the indie sections felt dominated by iOS Store or Google Play Store games for the most part. I mean, you had a few. And VR, of course, which is...
VR is interesting. I know we're kind of now jumping away from console wars into maybe VR wars or the indie versus AAA. But something that was interesting was that if you look at things like the Kinect and previous peripheral style expansions into consoles, is that AAA has become a lot more nervous about trying to put all their eggs in one basket, or it's too hard for them to manage and they don't want to deal with it. And so something that I've seen happen is if you look at PAX East and you look at how many indie VR games there were, it's partially because the developers of the hardware went, hey, look, we know that the AAA software games don't want to try and make it a $60 VR title, but if we fund your 5-6 person company, do you want to try making a VR game? And that's a really interesting new development.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's rather than put the risk in all of your own big name developers and programmers and stuff to work on VR, which may or may not succeed. I mean, let's not forget this isn't the first attempt at VR in gaming. It's still questionable how well it's going to catch, if it's a fad, things like that. Get in some of the smaller guys, the indie guys and stuff, have them be like, hey, we're looking at this, we want you to develop it. It's going to be under our big company flagship name and such. So it's making a prime breeding ground for the indies. Would definitely, I think, be the groups that spearhead the advancements of VR. Having said that, though, Resident Evil 7 having a VR component, or at least the I think with PlayStation VR.
Yep.
Yes.
I don't know if they had the Oculus Rift, but the fact that the nature of that game being first-person point of view, the controls for it and such, the reviews of it as a VR game are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's a great game in general, which is helpful. It's not shovelware that's like, hey, here's this really nifty technology. Let's see what we can do to develop to the technology. It's more like, we have this idea. It's going to be a great game. Hey, you know what's cool? Let's add this with VR. I think that mindset, rather than we must make this as VR as possible, turned into, hey, here's an interesting way we could deliver it, really helped with that. And if we see more games like RE7, we're going to see more big name companies and such, Bethesda or Bungie, whoever the hell decides next, developing AAA VR games.
Actually, did you see the reviews and some of the information? I know that Conan just did a Coolest Gamer on this, Wilson's Heart, where you're like a 60-year-old war vet in a black and white hospital and it's VR horror. look it up. There's some really interesting stuff going on.
And we shall see. I mean, we'll see if now we start getting exclusivity on VR. But in the meantime, going all the way back to Reid's original point, it's coming back. It's reaching the point now where the way I do my gaming now is basically slowly becoming PC plus whatever Nintendo console is out at the time.
Damn Nintendo fanboy.
Well, you're not going to find Mario and Zelda and, all of those fun properties on Sony or Microsoft platform. I think Miyamoto would probably hang himself before seeing Mario on the likes of them.
Well, I don't know if you've seen it, but apparently there is a group that is developing an emulator for Breath of the Wild to have it run on PC. Obviously not Nintendo official and such. They're doing it solely to see if they can, quote unquote here, solely to see if they can migrate the technology.
They better hope Nintendo doesn't get wind of that, because as soon as they do, cease and desist.
Oh, I'm sure Nintendo's already caught wind of it. It's been all over different. If Nintendo has any inclination of trying to follow technology to any degree, it's been all over the place. But they've gotten close to doing a pretty good emulation for it. So just pointing that out there. Not that I'm condoning, go buy a Switch if you want to play the game, folks. Don't pirate your games. But I mean, we're getting
disclaimer. Bullshit.
Exactly, but no. Part of why I bring that up though is because even the technology that's being used in consoles is no longer the gate holder, basically, for why this game is an exclusive on this system or is a PC exclusive, such like that. All the technology is becoming so similar now that you're not going to have that excuse.
And that's exactly it. That's we're not talking hardware that is specific to just one piece of technology. It's the same thing with the Mac and PC debate. I mean, their only difference now between the two is the operating system. The hardware's the same.
Yeah, pretty much. In some cases, PC hardware is a little better than the Mac, but yeah, no, with the gist of it is exactly that. It's all coming. We're coming to the point where we can't advance too much more in what we're putting into things without it being put into everything.
Right.
So,
right.
That being said, I do have to just go back a moment and say, in terms of exclusive titles on consoles, right now Breath of the Wild is the one thing that has me interested in the Switch, and the one game that would make me contemplate buying it. But the problem is, of course, there's, as we've discussed previously when we discussed the episode with the Switch, or I think Nintendo, one of the last episodes I was on, there needs to be more options to warrant buying that machine. And that's similar to why I think it's going to shape PC ports of games, because you're going to have more people. Why am I going to pay, $300, $400 for this console when I can turn those $300, $400 into an 8 gigabyte video card, or a 4 or 8 gigabyte video card, or more RAM, and make those games look even better on my PC?
Yeah, I mean, there is there are many reasons why we have emulation in the first place. I mean, I plunked down $75 to get a Raspberry Pi and put RetroPie on it. So, there is still a demand for that. I mean, admittedly, I did break my own rule about, I'll only buy a console when there's enough games out there for me to justify buying the cost. No, I spent $300 solely to play Breath of the Wild. That was that was one of those. Since I don't own a Wii U, and Nintendo never did a price cut for the Wii U during its entire lifespan, I'm like, you know what? Knowing how popular the Switch is going to be, I did not want it to happen what happened when the original Wii came out, which was I had to wait 8 months before somebody gave me some hot secret information Walmart's going to have the Wii this weekend. You might want to run out and get one before... So I did not want to make that mistake again, so I pre-ordered the Switch and now have a whopping 2 games for it. So... And with that, that'll be the segue into the second half. So we've got some pretty good chat going on here. So in the meantime, you'll have some music. We'll go off into our secret holodeck, because that's the future of video games right there. It's not VR, it's the holodeck.
The Matrix has you, Brian.
Yeah, it does. It does, so... Alright, you're listening to our first free play episode of Season 7 of Downloadable Content. We'll be back. Welcome back to our first free play episode of Season 7 of here on Downloadable Content. We're all still here. We have not gone diving down the VR rabbit hole
yet. It's still too expensive.
But I did hear a rumor that now a game called Mario and Master Chief at the Olympic Games is being made.
I'll buy that for $1.
I would pay just to see the trailer for that. Not even play it. Just I'd pay just for the trailer of them running, and also Master Chief just turning, going, "Wait, I have an assault rifle," and then things get really weird, really quickly.
So we've talked about a number of topics in the first half. So second half, I will open. And we closed the first half talking a bit about Nintendo, which will segue into what we start the second half with. Now, hopefully, if all of our if my downloadable content posting schedule has worked out, you out there on the wide world of the internet will have heard the episode just before this, in which Ben, Nick, Ron, and I give our first impressions about the Nintendo Switch. 2 hours of that. But just I won't repeat all of that, but I just wanted to bring some information here. We've got some sales numbers for the Switch for its first month of release.
Mm-hmm.
And so it came out on March 3rd. And so for the period of March 3rd to March 31st, it sold 2.74 million consoles.
There was actually a small article I read that Nintendo came out saying, we didn't even know it was going to sell that much.
I'm not surprised. No one's been able to keep it in stock. So almost 3 million consoles within the first month. That's amazing, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny stat for this is that, we've had 2.74 million Switches, but we've had 2.76 million versions of Breath of the Wild for the Switch. So the Breath of the Wild for the Switch has outsold the Switch.
Possibly because people are in the hopes that, okay, I'll get the game now, and then as soon as the game, the console is available, I'm going to get that, and just desperately searching.
I just find that money. I'm like, that's greater than a 100% attach rate. Great.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's fun though.
And Breath of the Wild so far, I'm really liking it. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, really liking that. So some very good numbers for the Switch. So there's some very positive things that I'm looking forward to. At the same time, I feel that I have to rag on Nintendo for a couple of very stupid business decisions that they have also recently made.
Stupid business decisions?
No!
Perish the thought.
The first being the announcement that came just this past Friday, so for those of you keeping score, the 28th of April, in which Nintendo announced a new handheld console to further add to Reid's confusion.
Oh god, yeah.
Nintendo is putting out in July the new 2DS XL.
And I am pissed about that.
So am I. I saw the news, and the first thing I thought was, Nintendo, really? Why are you insulting my intelligence? You're putting a 2DS in a 3DS shell and labeling it new.
Well, it's not exactly. It's, from what my understanding of it is, it does feature the new 3DS processor in it.
Yes!
So it can play like Xenoblade Chronicles, I think, is currently the only game that you must have the new processor to play, but it can play that. It's got some of the features for, the slightly better screen, some features of the better internal workings, just without 3D capability.
And that's what the 2DS has always been. It's been a 3DS without the 3D. Without the stupid slider that gives a stereoscopic 3D.
That's why I bought one, to the much mocking of some of the present company.
Well, I can't really mock you too much, because I got a 2DS before I bought a 3DS. Because I felt similarly. I felt and still feel that the 3D is a gimmick.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you there.
I have a 3DS, and I've never played any 3DS game with 3D on. The few times I've tried, I'm just like, nope, getting a headache now. I'm going to turn the slider back off. So I was very, very pissed that my 2DS broke within the first few months. As in, it actually did break. I brought it to work with me. I, had it in my work bag, and, waiting for April to come get me after work. I'm playing my 2DS. I put it in my work bag, and I just, lightly toss my work bag into the back seat, and the next thing I know, the screen broke.
Oof.
And I'm like, well, that was a waste of money. So I went and bought a 3DS, which has not broken and has taken considerable more punishment. Then I see this new 2DS XL, and I'm just thinking, oh, good lord. And I also felt bad for all the electronics retail associates in the world that when this thing comes out, they're going to have to repeat themselves 1,000 times a day to ignorant parents who refuse to do the research. Because they're going to be like, oh, what's the difference between the 2DS and the new 2DS and the new 3DS? And they're going to have to repeat that
over and over.
Oh, yeah. It's bad enough trying to keep track with the current 3DS, new 3DS, 3DS XL, new 3DS XL. It's like, come on. I'm like, really?
And April was like, what's the difference between the two? I said, $50. That's the difference. The 3DS is $200. This new 2DS is going to be $150. And yeah, I'm sure you're annoyed, Reid, because you've got the wedge.
Yeah, I just bought the wedge.
You did. Oh, don't worry. Ben made fun of me too when I bought the 2DS as well. So
yeah, well, I had just bought the slice of cheese 2 weeks, I want to say, before PAX. Namely because I really wanted to play Monster Hunter, and I figured, okay, this is something to have at PAX. And at the time, to be honest, I had a Target gift card, and it was like, hey, essentially, this is my $20 console.
Yeah, go for it. That makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
But now, enjoying that and some of the different games on it, and hearing this release, it's like, why couldn't they have just done that? That same concept. Essentially, take the 2DS working, stick it in a foldable 3DS shell. That's the aspect that I like the most. The folding aspect. So seeing, I always feel like
I can understand your frustration there.
Yeah, I don't know. I always feel like Nintendo, with a lot of things, are like, well, here's a great idea. We're just not going to implement it for several years until it's.
This is the problem with any. Sorry. This is the problem with any genius in any field, right? Whether it's a game director, developer, designer, where you love them because of their eccentricities and the fact that they're not going to play by the rules and they're not going to play by the book. But because Nintendo is a company that's based off of kind of running other developers, publishers out of their own system and out of their own pocket, some of their weird eccentricities are just so bizarre because they're so different from what's now a standardized way of doing business in the games industry, for better or worse. And sometimes it's great. Sometimes I love the stuff that they do because they're trying different things. But then other times you're just kind of shaking your head and going, I don't understand you. What's wrong with you? Are you having a seizure or mental breakdown? Please explain. We're here for you, Nintendo. Like you're not sure how to react to them sometimes.
Yeah, and the other thing I was thinking when I saw that announcement was, wait a minute, Nintendo, didn't you already do this? Didn't you? Isn't it called the DS? I mean, okay, fine. You just basically made a DS that can play all DS games and all 3DS games. But what shocked me the most, because Ben was trying to defend Nintendo while I was busy beating the shit out of them. Apparently the 3DS keeps selling like hotcakes. there's something like 63 million units that Nintendo has sold.
Jeez.
And they're on pace to sell another 6 million more this year. So, Nintendo is... something I did mention was that Nintendo has pretty much cornered the handheld console market for all of the tablets and iPads and mobile gaming that is out there. You say the PS Vita and people are like, who?
What's that now?
Oh, I miss decent PlayStation portable games.
I know. And so basically this is Nintendo saying, you know what? We've got you in the palm of our hand. We can do whatever we want. But I can't help but feel that this is going to cannibalize some of their sales. But that remains to be seen. The other thing that it says to me is that Nintendo might be actually acknowledging quietly that the 3D is, yes, a gimmick. And, because they don't talk about the 3D aspect of the 3DS anymore in any of their promotional material. I don't know if any of you've noticed that.
I have. I mean, again, that's kind of Nintendo being Nintendo. Is they're the most willing company to go, hey, here's a gimmick, let's try it. Let's try out this Rumble Pack. Let's try out this thing. Let's try out that thing. And I love them for that. I love them for being so experimental. Absolutely. But sometimes I'm not a fanboy of Nintendo either, because they do make some really weird business practices that don't seem to make logical sense from the outside. Every so often it pays off, but other times because they're too stubborn, like with the Wii U, it doesn't work out in their favor. So I want to see where they're going to go next from here. Their Switch is definitely paying off. I'm glad they're going in that direction. I'm glad they opened up to some mobile gaming. That's a great push for them. But let's see what this new 2D, 2DL XS 95-300 does,
Well, part of me wonders if it's sort of the swan song of the DS. And the only reason I say that, I say this with a lot of hope, being an owner of one and all, and not to really bug on Nintendo too much, but just looking at the past records and looking at the Switch now, where it has that mobility factor, which is one of the things they really play up with it. I could see at some point down the line them coming with the Switch 2.0 or a slight upgrade to the Switch to extend the mobile play aspect, the battery life or so. And even though Nintendo has always been good at having two consoles, it's handhelds and it's console, traditional TV top console, the Switch is blending that line enough that I'm wondering if they're just going to end up, if we're still going to support the 3DS statements that they've made a few times when asked, what the future of the DS is going to be. It rings too much to me like how both the Game Boy was when the Game Boy Advance was first coming out. We're still going to support regular Game Boy. And I think 2 additional games came out after Game Boy Advance's release. And then Game Boy to DS, where once more Nintendo said, we're still going to support, the DS is not a Game Boy. They're 2 separate things. We're going to support the Game Boy. And they did for maybe a year after, before everything just switched to the DS. So I feel like this is either their attempt to make the DS even more approachable for young kids or just people in general, or maybe it's like the last. It's the Game Boy Color of the Game Boy era, essentially.
You're not the only one who has that opinion. I was looking at the comments section of the Kotaku article. Somebody wrote an opinion about the fact that because Nintendo is putting out the new 2DS XL, somebody opined that this is Nintendo finally acknowledging that we're saying goodbye to 3D. And so, I mean, again, I don't know how many people out there, how many listeners, how many people out there, if you're all listening, how many of you who own a 3DS and actually use the 3D function, because I sure as hell don't. And if my 2DS did not break so quickly, I'd still have it. Because that's what drew me to it. Just like you said, Reid. It's like, hey, have access to the entire 3DS library and not have to not that stupid slider. Great. $50 cheaper? Yes, please. I'll take it. And maybe it's going to come to that. Maybe we will see the 3DS and Switch become one. Because as you also said that, Nintendo is playing up the portability of the Switch. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe you'll be able to play 3DS games on the Switch. Who knows? But
it's Nintendo. We really don't know. Someone tell us.
Exactly. So you have that silly decision, and then the second stupid decision, which
the second one.
There's a second.
There's
one.
Two.
There is two. Some of you may have heard of its existence. I never saw one, so I don't believe it exists, but apparently it did. The NES Classic Edition.
Oh.
The elders tell tales of those.
It's... So, apparently, this thing was in such high demand that Nintendo put out this tiny little NES which had 30 games built into it with a USB NES controllers that no one could keep in stock ever. And Nintendo decided, we're not going to make them anymore. And everyone went, what are you doing?
You have gold here. I mean,
you
the
are
only thing I can
printing
imagine
money.
is that maybe they weren't making money off of it, like in terms of maybe it was even sold out, but they found out that the cost ratio wasn't in their favor, or they found that there might be a serious defect going down the line. Those are the only things I could imagine as to why they would stop doing it.
Or they just want to have those games come back out on the Switch's virtual console and be able to charge a little bit more than the price of the Nintendo Classic is my thought process.
I mean, then you have, assholes like me, who were posting on comment threads, saying, "Hey guys, go on Amazon, plunk down $75 for a Raspberry Pi, and then download the emulators. Done." But I know that a lot of people do not like to indulge in, that is technically piracy, but I know that, obviously there's a nostalgia factor in there. I mean, you have this little device that looks like the NES of old, and it's got 30 games, and it's HDMI. You don't have to fiddle around with that stupid coaxial cord that we grew up with. And
on Etsy, you can get a classic NES body for the Raspberry Pi.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I didn't feel like flunking down more money for it, though. So, this is just... We were all looking at this decision and just dumbfounded, like, Nintendo, why would you pull something that is so very, very popular? And Nintendo's reply has been something like, well, this was always meant to be a limited item. And I smell a little...
That doesn't answer the question.
Yeah, I smell bullshit. I'm like, that's a dodge. Why are you stopping production on something that clearly has a ton of demand that you're still not able to keep up with? And nobody knows. So it's like, what was your basis for this decision? And are you... And now the rumors are flying that Nintendo is going to make a Super Nintendo Classic Edition, and I'm just like, alright, if Nintendo does that, fuck you. Just... Thank you, Nintendo, for making it very blatantly obvious that this is a total money grab.
Well, if it was a money grab, why wouldn't they just keep producing the first one? That's the thing, is that since it was selling so well, why would they cancel it? Because it looked like it was printing money from the outside.
Yeah.
So, who knows?
I'm like, did the rights... the only thing I could think of logically was that maybe that for some of these games that they had to get the rights back for to sell them.
That could be it.
Like
that's a good point.
They were only good for a certain amount of time. Like, yeah, we'll license this back, but only for a limited time. So, you know, that's the only thing that I could think of logistically and logically why Nintendo would be pulling the plug on such a high demand item. But I do not know Japanese, and I don't know what goes on in the boardroom, so...
But Sega was quick to cash in on Nintendo's decision.
Of course they were!
That was a brilliant move there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sega has no problem just sending Sonic to the highest bidder now. They've basically become the Sonic pimp. It's like, oh, all right, we need money. Here, Sonic, you go out on that Microsoft console, or here, you know, spread your legs for Sony. So,
don't put it like that.
Which reminds me, never Google Sonic the Hedgehog fan art. Just don't do it.
You sound like you speak from experience, Reid.
Yeah, just take my word for it. You thank me later. Don't ever do it.
Just also don't do a Google image search for My Little Pony either.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nintendo, you're doing great with the Switch, but why? Why are you? I don't understand your thought process sometimes. It's like when you're given, whenever it seems like that there are sometimes the decisions that Nintendo makes, like, we want to give you money, Nintendo. Why do you make it so hard to do it? Do you not like money?
I'm calling it now. They're going to re-release the classic NES console, you know, the thing, by the next holiday season as a limited run. I'm calling it. That's what I see happening right now.
You might be right. You might absolutely be right. So, all right. So that was my contribution to the episode. So back to Wyatt and Reid. I know you guys had mentioned something that you wanted to bring up over the break, so the floor is yours.
Well,
don't all jump at once.
If you insist. Well, since we've been talking a lot about different, handhelds and different ways of playing our favorite games and such, I've been noticing, and I have to say, I've gotten quite into playing some digital card games. And I mean, like, you know, going back several years, Magic the Gathering was the king of card games, no doubt about it. Huge fan of that game. Huge fan of the World of Warcraft cash tie-in, you know, Warcraft card game.
Yeah, that was some great times back in college.
Yeah, those were fantastic. You know, grab your deck, build it up, throw down with a couple of friends, or combine with your friends to throw against one insane deck. And we've seen, like, the popularity of that kind of revisited with Hearthstone. And I think because Hearthstone has become so popular, I feel like the market is growing almost exponentially now with different digital card games, essentially. And with the advent of, you know, handheld iOS or Android device, which is what I've been primarily playing, one that I got into from PAX, which I'm trying to remember if Adam did Adam do something with Sprites and Dice on Eternal, the card game, Wyatt? Or
yes, he did. He fell in love with Eternal, as well as Dana, and he actually streamed it for about a week straight for us. He fell in love with that game.
Yeah, and because of him, you know, he's the one that turned me onto it. I had a chance to try it and sign up for it and everything at PAX. And I've been regularly playing it on my phone. And it got me thinking, because ironically, the two big things that game-wise, I walked away from PAX last year was Eternal on my phone in terms of, the video game. And for regular games was Arkham Horror, the card game. So 2 card games in 2 different formats.
Okay.
And I have to say, I'm really enjoying the fact that I can walk around and play a quick throwdown of this card game, whether it's against a PC or, go on and play online with somebody without needing to lug boxes of cards around. So
it is nice. My experience with digital card games has actually been from the Pathfinder adventure card game, which is a fantastic card game. Again, you pay $60 and you can play with 4 people. And you're pretty much doing Dungeons and Dragons style scenarios, but as a card game where you're kind of going through different locations and trying to find a villain. I know, Reid, I've played that with you sometimes in the past. It's a great game. They come up with some great expansions. They came out with it for iPhone. I believe it's also just for iOS in general, where pretty much you can download the game for free, and if you can build up currency, then buy individual scenarios. But for $20, you can get the equivalent of all the different expansions for one full set of the Adventure Pack card game, which is normally $120 in physical material, and it's this massive box with lots of poundage in it. And I'm able to put this on my phone, and I'm able to play on my own and just hang out and have a good time. And that's a fantastic thing. And we're seeing this with board games as well, where I was able to go on, if you just type into the iPhone store, type in Playdeck, you'll get a whole bunch of award-winning board games that you can buy for $3, $4, $5. You can actually play Pandemic, the really well-known co-op board game, on your phone for like $3. And that's hard to say no to in some ways.
That's a good point. I mean, it's the price, the physical need to carry stuff around. It's amazing to be able to be like, I'll throw a couple bucks down for like a pack or so of the cards and feel as happy as if I physically bought like, a booster deck or a box or so of cards in the real world. And I'm wondering if this aspect, you had mentioned Pathfinder apparently has a digital equivalent, which I didn't even know about until just now. But I'm wondering if we're going to see more and more games get that digital equivalent in the card game aspect.
Well, Asmodee just created a new system. This is mentioned in the Secret Cabal podcast, I believe, which was that they created Asmodee Digital, and now they're building into the mobile market to make more board game translations into digital. Now, they have tried this in other ways. For example, there is, the tabletop simulator on Steam already, so you can play long distance. But there is this new method that came out in the last 2 months, I think. It was Kickstarter originally, called Tabletopia, where if you spend like $5 or $10 a month, it's pretty much Netflix for board games, where you can get a room online and you can then host groups of your friends and you can play games digitally, like Scythe, which is a $60 board game or more.
Oh, wow.
I have not had a chance to try it myself. I do want to review it to be sure. But I think it's going to be a fantastic way for you to kind of play, since I know, Brian, you're an hour and a half north of us, and sometimes you want to play board games. Reid, I know you're only about a half an hour away, but sometimes our work schedule makes us balance out. But if it is something that's functional, we can play board games long distance through our computer, and the technology is getting better and better. And now board game companies are finding out that people like these mobile games, and it's not taking away from their sales. So what that means is I played Lords of Waterdeep on my phone first, because I had heard about this game. I thought it might be interesting, but I didn't want to plunk down $50 for it, right? Or even $40 if you're buying online. I was able to buy the game on my iPhone for $6, $7, and play it. I played it, 5-6 rounds, and I went, holy crap, this is fantastic. I'm going to buy the game now. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It's not mutually exclusive.
And for me personally, that's the biggest reason why I don't play collectible card games physically, because of the investment, the actual cash investment to be able to keep up. So having a digital card game, the outlay, at least from what you guys are talking about, the investment doesn't sound quite so heavy.
Oh, not at all. And I think it's because they have that, there's not as much cost in needing to print and cut the actual cards themselves. The art, like none of the quality is declined. There's fantastic art. I've played 3 different, digital card games now. I played Hearthstone. It was fun, but it wasn't for me. Just because of some of the cost for its expansions. Not to tear down on it, but I think I started a little too late to really get excited for it. But I've played the Elder Scrolls Legends, which is a card game in the Elder Scrolls universe, basically, and the one that me and Wyatt were mentioning, Eternal. And the art on the cards is fantastic. Now, the downside is playing on my phone as opposed to playing on a tablet. Things get squinched down. You can't partake the art quite as well, because now you're playing a whole set of cards on essentially what's the size of a physical card. But for both those games, there's options to advance and still get cards without putting down any real world money. Or if you are so inclined, you drop somewhere between $3 to theoretically $100. You want to go absolutely crazy, get everything type. But there's that nice range that you can go to. And I think so much of that is because, the companies don't need to worry about boxing and shipping and creating. They can just, instant delivery right to your device.
Right. And again, I think that a lot of companies in the 21st century, where everything can be digital, are realizing that demos or even offering things for free doesn't mean that you're going to lose out on sales. I'm not talking about free-to-play games. I'm talking about a game company that'll be like, oh, hey, we just came out with, let me think of a good example. I came out with Mario 20, but we'll offer Mario 19 for free as a week or 2 ahead of time to see if people get interested. Or they'll go, hey, look, we're going to offer this game on sale for it on your phone. And then people realize, hey, look, people play board games because they like the experience of a board game, right? I mean, Brian, I know you're a huge video game fan. This is mostly about video games. But there is something that's different about sitting around a table, pulling out a 6-pack, or just ordering a pizza and getting to play with your friends in person, right? It feels entirely different.
Right. I mean, absolutely.
And so for them to offer a digital version of it, like Tabletopia and these companies that are trying to sell $60, $70, $80 board games, which is huge, they're still able to offer it and go, hey, just want to let you know, go ahead and buy it. Try it out on our system here. I know you're only going to be spending $10 a month and not even just for our game, but if you play it once or twice, and if you're a board game fan, you might then go ahead and want to buy it in person. It's not just one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that with other games as well. I mean, board games that already exist. I mean, you can find an online variant of Boss Monster. Pretty soon we're going to be seeing an online variant of Smash Up. Exploding Kittens. So, there is a definite demand for it, and it's certainly, I personally like the fact that, we own these games, we've played the physical versions of these games, and we love them.
Right.
And if we can recreate that sort of, real-time, human interaction online for cheaper than the physical game, then, go for it. I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I think it's even being embraced with the same type of interest by regular gamers of board game, card game, whatever the case may be. I mean, I know Hearthstone's been doing different tournaments and things that remind me of the good old days of the touring Magic tournaments and things. Introduced the same way as a lot of esports are. One giant screen, the players go up and play on separate computers, and you see the screen for the field. But it has that same type of draw of people, even on the competitive aspect.
Right. Also, look at so look at Heroes of the Storm. I know we're moving away from the board game thing, but Heroes of the Storm was a MOBA that was kind of done the same way League of Legends and all the ones beforehand are. You can play the game to get a in-game currency. They'll let you buy heroes and kind of get some of the core things you need for gameplay, but then you need to spend real-world money to gain all the additional stuff, which was a great kind of model for people. So it's a free-to-play where it's not play to win. Sorry, it's a free-to-play, so it's not, pay to win, but instead it's a way to kind of augment your experience. They just changed into something called Heroes of the Storm 2.0, where they changed the model to what Overwatch currently is. And what Overwatch currently is that every time you level up a hero or you go through a level round, you can actually then take a moment and you can open up a loot chest and get stuff for free. And that can be original like hero skins or sound effects that they would be able to sell individually for $5 or $6, and they made it a lottery system. So now people have more of a way to play the game without spending money themselves, which is, I found really interesting that they made that change. But it works because, again, companies are realizing that if you offer stuff for free, but then you say, hey, look, thanks for playing the game. If you like our game that much, you're going to spend the money on it. And they're right. It feels more honest in some ways, at least for me.
That's certainly a definitely valid reason. But because I see, like, look at how much space tabletop gets devoted to at a convention like PAX.
Right.
And, I go through the tabletop section all the time during PAX, and it's like, I want you, and you, but I don't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just introduced me to 3 games over the weekend. That if if there were online versions of those games, probably for cheaper, I would just easily buy them. Alrighty. So do we have anything else we want to chat about, or do we just want to wind this down and put it to bed?
Well, I think there's always things to talk about in this sort of world, but I think we've covered a massive range.
We have. We've gone all over the place.
Oh, Helter Skelter.
I haven't played that. I have not played Helter Skelter. Is that an Atari game? No.
Commodore 64.
Although yeah. I think I can emulate Commodore 64 games on the RetroPie. I've just haven't tried it.
You should be able to.
Although it was a lot of fun playing the because I did bring my RetroPie down to Wyatt's, and I purchased USB extension cords for my Super Nintendo USB controllers because the cord's only about 3 feet long. I'm like, nah, I need something a little bit longer than that. Alrighty. So, if any of you out there on the wide world of the internet have any questions, comments, thoughts on this episode, any of the topics that we brought up here, or any other episode, or want to give us ideas for future free play episodes, because there will be 2 more. I usually do 3 a year. You can give us feedback on www.dlcpodcast.com. Just look for the feedback button, send an email. We like hearing from you. I mean, we need constant validation. Please, we're hungry for fame.
Witness him.
What he said. And also you can find every single episode of our podcast. All 130 episodes are there. They're also on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and yeah, it's all there. So, Wyatt, as promised, I'll give you a couple minutes to plug Sprites and Dice.
Why, thank you. You're so kind. Yes, my name is Wyatt. I am the editor-in-chief of SpritesandDice.com. We are a gaming website that covers board games and video games. We do a little bit of everything. And we also now have a own streaming channel at Sprites and Dice. You can follow us on Facebook or Twitter. And we now have a podcast as well. We're just in our 10th episode, so we are a baby in comparison to the illustrious downloadable content here with Brian. But definitely check us out if you like board games and video games.
Yes, Sprites and Dice does a lot more stuff with board games and downloadable content. Reid, are you a... For some reason, I thought you were a contributing writer to that or something, although I could be wrong. I could be imagining that.
I've occasionally guest written for it. It's been a while since I've really had any articles be posted up, but I guess write on occasion. And if Wyatt ever asks of me, I will happily write again. So
okay. I think that was a hint there.
Nudge, nudge.
Alrighty, well, good stuff. So, on that note, I would like to thank Wyatt and Reid for being on this episode, and all that remains for me to do is just to say farewell. So, I'm Brian, and have a good one, everybody.